Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Gal Swisa Cohen, and on today's episode of the Israeli Bond on hmTv, my special guest, Beata Schulman, will join me for a conversation about her childhood in Poland after World War II and how did this shaped her Jewish identity. So a couple of words about Beata. So Dr. Beata Schulman currently works for American Jewish Committee Long Island's regional office. She holds a MA and PhD from Jagiellonian University in Kraków, Poland. Did I say it correctly?
Almost, but very good.
You can correct me afterwards if you want. And was a Fulbright visiting scholar at NYU. Previously, she served as executive director of Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial Foundation, raising funds to preserve the historic site, and as program director for the Auschwitz Institute for Genocide Prevention. A dedicated Jewish educator, and advocate, she has lectured as an adjunct at Yeshiva University and Jagiellonian University. Native to Poland, she discovered her Jewish roots as a teen, a discovery that would later shape her life and career. She moved to US in 2009 and recently moved to West Hempstead with her husband, Ilan, and children, Ella, Abby, and Elijah.
Thank you for having me, Gal.
Thank you so much for coming here today. So I want to start actually from the beginning. So in the bio, one of the statements that you provided me is that you discovered your Jewish roots as a teen. And it made me think, what do you mean? Can you take me back to your childhood? How does Judaism look like for you as a child in Poland?
So as a child in Poland, Judaism was not present for me. I grew up still behind Iron Curtain. And during that time, before Poland's democratic transformation, I would say minorities were not necessarily acknowledged or celebrated. And also, most of the Jews were in hiding.
Can you just explain to me what is the Iron Curtain? I'm not quite sure that I'm familiar with this.
So the eastern part of Europe, central and eastern part of Europe, Iron Curtain was something which was considered a divider of Europe. And the Iron Curtain went through Germany, and everything east of Berlin was behind the Iron Curtain. And the downfall of Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall was what started the transformation for many of the countries. And so during the 80s, on my early childhood, I don't remember much of anything connected to Jews. Everybody was Polish. I grew up in a mixed Polish-Jewish family. I had a childhood which I would consider happy and wonderful. And but from the eyes of a child, when you look at the time living in a country which was not necessarily fully free, or your minority identity was not really celebrated or acknowledged, I still had a happy childhood. But when I look from the perspective of my parents, there was lack of freedom, lack of opportunity. And this transformation to democracy really what opened the world into discussing history, identity, minority identities. And it opened the door for, many of the Jews to acknowledge Jewish identity and a part of it. So I did not know that I'm Jewish till I was 12.
Oh, you did not know?
I had no idea.
So which kind of holidays did you celebrate?
I grew up Catholic. I celebrated Christmas.
Oh.
We were not particularly very religious, but we celebrated Christmas. We had Christmas tree. We had, a meal on. We had a meal on Easter, and we probably went to church twice or 3 times per year. But that Catholic identity was part of my, early childhood, and I enjoyed my non-Jewish Catholic life as a young child. And there was this moment in the 90s when I was about 12, and there were two things that I knew about Jews at that point. I knew that Jesus Christ was Jewish, and that this is what they taught me in the school, which was not really correct, that Jews killed him. I guess my Christian religious teachers were not really aware of Nostra Aetate and all the Catholic Jewish relations which went on in between that time and the 80s and 90s. So this is what I knew. And at one point I came back home, I put on TV, and there was a Holocaust movie. And it was eye-opening. I went to my mom, who was cooking dinner in the kitchen, and I said, "Mom, do you know that Jews lived in Poland and they all died during the Holocaust?" And my mom, I think, was caught off guard, and she said something along the side of, "Oh, your grandmother was Jewish." And that's it. And that was the statement that opened the door of me exploring what it means that my grandmother was Jewish, what it means that she was, if she's still alive. So is she Jewish, or is because it's in the past? And it all started for me.
Okay, so can you take us through what do you mean when you say it all started? What did you do after this shocking moment?
I became very curious. So I grew up in a family that had a lot of books in the house. So when you have something which is, half said, whispered, my mom was caught off guard. I started asking more questions. She didn't really have answers for me. So I started reading books, whatever I could find. And this was also the time that we started learning about World War II and the Holocaust in then still primary school. It was 7th and 8th grade. So I started reading everything, what I can read about this, knowing that, this is a part of me, that my grandmother was Jewish. That was the statement that I knew. I didn't know exactly how it affects me. Am I Jewish? Am I not Jewish? I didn't know any other Jewish people. I had this transformative moment when I went to high school, and I think this was the first year of high school. I met other kids who had a very similar background as I do. So they had one of their grandparents Jewish. And we had an amazing history teacher who also was one of the history teachers that was creating a Holocaust education program for the whole country. And our high school had a student exchange with students from Israel. And the teenagers that were coming to Poland on the Holocaust tours were visiting our high school. So there was this one transformative moment for me when they took us to a big gymnasium. They gave us a couple questions on the little card, say, "Oh, you will have the integration and dialogue meeting with Israeli teens." And I was very excited. It's like first time me meeting other Jewish kids. I knew of some other kids in my class who had maybe similar background as I do. But I went into this gymnasium and I walked in and I see those kids. For the first time in my life, I was like, I feel more one of them than myself. It's like they are part of me. I see my face in their faces. I always felt a little different. 50% of Poland is blonde, blue-eyed. I was always darker. And seeing all these Israeli teens, they were a little loud. They were very outgoing. And I froze for a second and say, who am I? Am I part of this or part of that? I have these two identities inside of me. So it was a transformative moment for me to even meet them, speak with them, and just have this dialogue. And I think this was the moment that, for the first time in my life, I admitted to somebody I'm Jewish. I told it to them because I felt very comfortable.
Wow, this is a very shocking moment. But from what I understand from you now is that Poland already had an Holocaust education in schools.
Yes.
But still, in your house, in your family, the Holocaust theme was not discussed at all, even though you had your roots there. Can you explain why?
I think after the Holocaust, most Jews were still in hiding. So my grandmother survived. She survived on false documents. She was baptized as a teen, and she decided that those documents gave her safety. So she's going to live as a Pole from now on. And most of her Jewish friends, there were a couple around who knew her identity. They were living very similar lives. They were essentially in hiding, and they knew how dangerous it was during the Holocaust. They understood the dangers of post-war pogroms. Then a huge anti-Semitic wave in 1968, where many of Jews were kicked out of the country after Six-Day War. So they stayed in hiding. They decided to be Polish. They stayed in hiding, and they concealed their Jewish identity.
So it was from personal events that taught your grandmother and a lot of other Jews after the Holocaust and after World War II was over. And even though it was okay to be Jewish in Poland in this time, they still decided that they want to hush that, and they still decided that they want to
It's not really okay.
hide that.
It was not really okay to be Jewish at this time period. There was just a very, very small group of Jews who still lived their Jewish life. But most of Jews decided to integrate, to conceal their identities. Most of Jews intermarried. And my generation was one of those generations who were rediscovering their roots, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. The Jewish organizations became almost like, it's like a meeting for people who went through some kind of trauma, or I don't know, anonymous alcoholics. That we would sit in the circle and reveal this terrible secrets. Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm Jewish. Or I just recently discovered through going through my grandmother papers certain things, and I don't know how to process that. So our community was full of those young teens and students who were trying to learn what it means to be partially Jewish and how it blends into their identity.
So would you say that in the 90s, when you rediscovered your Judaism and you started to think, am I more Jewish or am I more Polish or what am I? Would you say it was more safe to be Jew? And how did this discovery was for you?
So it was a really interesting time. It was a wonderful time to be Jewish in Poland. On one side, the whole country was rediscovering its multicultural roots, and minorities were being celebrated. And in very big part, it was my non-Jewish friends who were so interested in history of minorities, in being Jewish. They would ask me all those questions about how it is to be Jewish.
So you started to be special because
I became special, but also in their eyes, I became specialist on being Jewish because I was the only Jew they knew. But also it put tremendous pressure on me because I felt a little bit stupid because I did not know much about being Jewish, and I'm asked all those questions. So it triggered this, need of learning, and many things changed in Poland, and both Israel started sending young Israelis to assist community, and
because we need to say that the context is that it was after the Iron Curtain fell, right?
Yes.
And Poland became a democracy, basically.
Exactly. And also American philanthropists started education programs. Lauder School, first Jewish school started in Poland. I was still not at the age of, because it started, I think, 2 or 3 years after I went to school. So I was not able to go through Jewish school, but there was a lot of opportunities to learn. And I was able to join some of them through my high school programs or then in college.
So you dived right into Judaism. Your MA, what was your MA about?
So I studied geography and religion, and somehow through that Jewish studies as well and Holocaust studies. So I did a fair mix of many things. I also started doing my second master's thesis in cultures of Middle East because I was more interested in studying Israeli culture, but I only did a year because then I needed to move to the United States. And it became my path, but there was a difference in my academic path. It was almost like for my own learning. But my work, my personal work in Poland was mostly connected to preserving historical sites, preserving Holocaust memory, and, being one of the only Jews in the country. There was so much responsibility put on us to take care of those historical places. So I started working for the Jewish community of Warsaw, Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage, at first as an intern in college, taking care of 600-something cemeteries, Jewish burial sites in Poland. And I felt this true connection to history, knowing that there are so many graves in Poland, but not many of us Jews over there. And that connection through history became very important for me.
And I wonder, how did your family took this new point of interest of it's not really new point of interest, because by that time you were all into Judaism and the history of Jewish people in Poland. And at the end of the day, we started this conversation from your family tried to hide this. So how did they...
It did not go easy.
Okay.
So I think they were very scared, and maybe they still are. My grandmother especially. At some point, I think it was 2006 or 2007, I went as public as I could. I organized an event about anti-Semitism sponsored by European Commission. It was called Tents Against Anti-Semitism, and it was in a public square of Warsaw, and there was multiple TV stations coming and interviewing me. And I was speaking as a member of Jewish community of Warsaw. And at that point, it scared my grandmother so much. She sat me down and she said, whatever you're doing right now is so dangerous, not only for you, but for our whole family. She was actually scared. She never really wanted to speak with me about her past. I only got from her these little bits and pieces when I kind of pulled a little bit when catching her off guard. It's almost like catching my mom off guard when she said to me, oh, your grandmother was Jewish. But when I started asking her a question, what it really meant, she was not able to really tell me much more. So I feel like my family is still in hiding in Poland. Many of them
Till this day?
Yes, don't publicly acknowledge their Jewish identity. Some of my cousins explored it. I think 2 or 3 of my cousins went to birthright to Israel. But besides that, many of them are not very involved with Jewish community. Especially now when anti-Semitism is again heightened, I feel that they are trying to stay very quiet about that.
Okay, this is actually, it's fascinating. It's mostly fascinating because, as I said, you dive right into exploring the history of Jews when the Jewish connection that you had at home is the only one you couldn't really investigate. So you needed to investigate externally to understand what happened to your own family.
Absolutely.
And I understand what they felt about that, but I wonder how you felt about this and how you feel today about your grandma and maybe your mom still. They, not wanting to really cooperate with this, with the Jewish background that they have, and your.
I think it happened to Jews in many, many countries and in many, many periods of history. And we are going through a period of history like that again.
Currently.
When many Jews feel scared about being Jewish. And that piece of being scared takes over the beauty of being Jewish. And, we can be loud and proud. And if our identity is strong, we will choose in the hardest time to be loud and proud Jews. But when identity is weak, many Jews go to hiding. And I think it's happening also across the world. We see on social media only the loud and proud Jews, but we don't know how many of Jews right now decide to conceal the identity. Look, it happened to Jews in Spain when many of them went into hiding. It happened to Jews in Poland after the Holocaust. Many of them who stayed decided to conceal their identity and not live Jewish life. And, this part of being Jewish became almost like a whisper in a family that, I'll tell you in a hushed voice that, we are Jewish, but let's not admit it loudly. My family did not have too many Jewish traditions. I think the only thing Jewish which I can think of growing up was having gefilte fish for a Christmas Eve dish.
For Christmas Eve, okay.
It's a very, very typical thing for, I think, Polish Jews to eat gefilte fish on Christmas Eve. Because this is the time when you don't eat meat. So you have only fish dishes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So... And
that's a way to have tradition.
I always thought that actually gefilte fish was a Polish dish till I discovered that not all my Polish friends had gefilte fish on Christmas Eve, but all my Polish Jewish friends had gefilte fish on the Christmas Eve. So that's a very, very Polish Jewish tradition.
Super interesting. And so we're gonna continue to a second episode where we'll tap more in depth into the anti-Semitism that you just mentioned briefly now, but we're gonna dive right into anti-Semitism in Poland. And okay, so we're gonna stop now. We're gonna continue in a bit our second episode, and I urge you to stay tuned to the second episode. But right now, I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of The Israeli Bond on hmTv. I appreciate very much my guest, Beata Schulman, for joining me and talking about her childhood in Poland after World War II and how it shaped your life and Jewish identity. If you enjoyed exploring the information, history, and stories of today's conversation, be sure to check out our other podcasts here on hmTv. Please subscribe, share, and stay connected for more engaging conversations. Until next time, take care and be well.